So we all know about the King of Fighters Stadium, right? This stage is pretty unique in that it's surrounded by invisible walls. The only way to get past them is to get hit hard enough, which will just result in a KO instantly afterwards anyways. And you can't just fly over them, because this is actually a box that extends upwards and forms a ceiling way past the upper Blastzone. You can tell because Sephiroth bonks his head on the ceiling right here. But what if I told you there actually is a way to explore the lands past the wall? Well, surely it wouldn't be as fun to explore as the world from Honkai Star Rail, the sponsor of today's video. Honkai Star Rail is a cross-platform free-to-play game brought to you by HoYoverse, the makers of Genshin Impact. So, fittingly, it's a game with a rich atmosphere and world building through an immersive story and setting, and of course has a really in-depth battle system, this time built on a turn-based mechanism, which offers loads of different combat combinations and thus ways to experience the game. And of course, the thing that always stands out the most to me with HoYoverse projects is the art design and graphics. This game is genuinely beautiful. It's honestly among my favorite looking games out there. Characters are given such detailed and diverse clothing and each have their own unique flair to them, so there's definitely going to be someone for you. I really dig what Serval's got going on for her, she looks pretty cool. And the gorgeous music, professional animation direction, and again, the art style in general, all in combination makes the game match even most top-notch TV series or anime, and frankly even movies. And wanna know the best part? Well, it's out now. Yeah, today is April 26th, and that's when the game is out, so there you go. Remember, it's free, so go down to the description or pinned comment, click the link, and give it a shot yourself. Trust me, if you remember the impact that Genshin Impact left, then you know you're going to want to give this one a shot too. And thank you, Honkai Star Rail, for sponsoring today's video. Anyways, Examine623 comes back to inform me of a way to get past the wall. All you need is either Villager or Isabelle. It works for both because what we're looking at is their final smash. Because you know how when you use the final smash, the character getting hit by it sort of gets moved into position, away from where they're standing? Yeah, I think you can start to put together how this works. If you get right up against the wall and use the final smash, after it ends, you'll see that the character has briefly managed to clip out of bounds. I use the word briefly because there are no special loading zones or shortcuts to be made with this wall clip. All that happens is you just sort of die. But even then, this is pretty special because this is a side Blastzone KO, with zero wall breaking animation. As far as I can tell, Villager and Isabelle's final smashes are the only ones capable of getting characters past the wall. The other somewhat similar ones, like Kirby's, Young Link's, and Toon Link's, don't actually accomplish this for some reason. Now, when I did Toon Link's, I noticed that with really good positioning, you can get the opponent outside of the wall during the final smash, which could get them KO'd like from before. But regardless of positioning, the launching hit of the final smash will always slam them into the wall, so ultimately it doesn't really work the same way. And of course, cutscene final smashes don't do it either. While like Toon Link, they can temporarily get them outside of the wall. Once the movie starts playing, nothing interesting happens, and then they get slammed into the wall, so nothing works. I didn't test every final smash because I value my time and 90% of them are the same thing anyways, so for the time being I'll just say that only Villager and Isabelle can cause this. Now if I use a metal box so that I take less knockback, I still get past the wall, and now I even hit the ground, which is solid. I know these results are mundane, but considering not even items are allowed past the wall, it's interesting that the ground is still there. Now if only you didn't get KO'd after a few seconds. Actually, I want to look more into that, and the camera angles in training mode are a bit limited, so let me just... Awesome, now it's a real match where testing is so much less convenient. Here we can see Metal Mario lying on the ground as a dead, unmoving corpse, and then one frame later, he's gone! This basically removes any possibility that what's KOing them is some sort of windbox or slope effect, or whatever, that drags them into the Blastzone. Rather, it seems to be based on a timer. A few other ways we can prove that. For one, even if you roll closer to the stage, the KO timing doesn't change. And in even funnier fashion, if you get farther away from the stage, nothing changes. Like right here, Samus ended up going out even more than usual, to the point where she even fell under the stage before getting KO'd. So here it's kind of a good thing that this KO timer happens, because if it didn't, I think Samus would be finding herself in a particularly itemless Metroidvania setting, if you know what I mean, if you're catching my drift, if you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you're... This is all extremely interesting because it implies there is no side Blastzone, just a timer. So what if I use the final smash at 999%? Well, then you get this. Not even the off-screen bubble is really able to follow along here. I'm also kind of curious about how far they're even traveling in those short few seconds. Wait, actually we can find that out, because there's a distance traveled stat at the end of the match. Unfortunately, handicaps only go up to 300%, but if we use some Franklin badges and Fox's lasers, we can get them up to 999% without taking any knockback and skewing the distance traveled numbers. Oh, and I gave Isabel my murder spirit just because I think Fox kinda deserves it. And when we do this, the distance Fox traveled is 1,032 meters, or basically a kilometer. In freedom units, that's 0.621371 God blessed American miles, traveled in the span of about 2.5 seconds. On top of that, there's a max launch speed stat, and here that is 5,017 kilometers an hour. This number wouldn't change regardless of whether or not the Blastzone was there, since it's measured on speed, not duration, as far as I can tell. But maybe someone more mathematically savvy could calculate how much distance Fox would have been launched had there been no timer-based KO system in place. Speaking of that, honestly, it's kind of the biggest obstacle in testing anything interesting with this fact. You're gonna take knockback after the final smash here, so there's gonna be a window of recovery needed before you can even start doing anything. And before anyone asks, yes, I've tried using stamina mode, metal boxes as you saw earlier, and super armor spirits, none of which really remove the knockback enough. They can decrease it, but you're still gonna be put into hit stun, and then you're gonna have to either jump or tech afterwards. So as far as I was able to try, anytime someone was on the ground, they only had a few extra frames before getting KO'd, which doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room for anything fun. However, as I toyed around with this, I discovered something very important. With the right DI, timing, and positioning, and usually with the help of the metal box to make said positioning easier, you can get your character to around right here before any timer-based KO happens. And you'll notice that no KO is happening. Now, if you rolled too far, this lack of a KO is because you got back inside the stage. Yes, the wall isn't solid when going from the outside in. But with proper positioning, you're at what I imagine to be the exact border of the wall, to where you haven't quite passed the threshold, but for some reason aren't in the area that triggers the timer-based KO anymore. And if you then step into that area, it'll take a few seconds for the KO to happen. So it didn't pause, it got reset, which opens up a lot of testing now. First, you can interact with people like this on either side and it works just fine. Though it seems that grabbing doesn't work when you're outside the wall using it on someone inside, at least for Samus's tether here, but the opposite does work, further adding to the idea that the properties of the wall are different from the outside. But because you can interact with people like this, that means you can footstool them. But since footstool puts you above the character and Samus is currently inside the barrier, that means by footstooling her, you get put inside the barrier too. She's basically just holding the door open for you. I try to use a lot of moves as villager out here, but most of them just don't work. Like down special just can't plant anything, the bowling ball just doesn't spawn, the slingshots don't seem to hit properly, the gyro also has a synonym for a lack of proper function, so it seems like projectiles don't work when outside of the wall, which sucks for villager since that's like half his kit. And also it means we can't use items out here either, though I'm going to test that more in about 25 seconds. Also, the slingshot one was kinda inconsistent, since while I was trying to test out how knockback works for going from the outside in, the slingshot did manage to hit here, even though it really doesn't normally. I guess you just have to be really up close, which is kinda weird, I guess. But yeah, taking knockback from outside the wall doesn't seem to cause anything out of the ordinary, you just get sent past it into the other side of the stage like normal. So the other thing I wanted to test in regards to this was items. Thanks for waiting 25 seconds. Because you can interact with things on either side of the wall, that means when you're holding the door open, you can pick up items and bring them over to no-clip land. And for things like battering items, they'll still work just fine. However, once you throw it, it just disappears. So there's not a lot of items that can really be used, or at least tested in particularly unique ways. But there were a few I was still curious about, and ones I'm sure I'd get comments about. Oh, before I do that, I'm adding this to the script last minute because I only just now thought of it, but I was curious to measure how much distance you can travel if getting hit from the home run bat at 990% now with this positioning, and especially now that the KO timer is reset. I didn't use spirits this time because I needed the knockback to be low enough on the first hit to allow Fox to even get into position, and yeah, that does technically mean that the launch distance numbers are slightly skewed because of this final smash knockback, but I don't think it would really matter that much. And here the result was 2,352 meters, over 1,300 more than last time. Oh, and here's the launch speed. There's not really a lot to comment here, I just think this is funny. You really won't be sending people this far anywhere outside of home run contest. Anyways, first, Pokeballs. Unfortunately, since you need to throw them before they can be used, they won't be able to spawn anything outside of the wall, as nothing will happen once they hit the ground. Now, I did try spawning Ditto in the wall to see if it would walk out or anything weird, but as much as I tried, the AI seemed really intent on getting back inside rather than breaking the rules and leaving the arena. And I guess I'm sure it's possible, but I started deciding that probably wouldn't even lead to anything interesting anyways. What could be interesting was assist trophies, since you just need to stand in order to spawn it, not throw an item. And when you spawn one outside the wall, one of three things seem to happen. For KOable assist trophies, when they spawn, they just teleport back inside the stage, the same way they would teleport if they got knocked into a normal Blastzone. For non-KOable assist trophies, like Skull Kid, you'll hear the sound of them spawning, but then they'll just go away instantly forever, and that's it. And I think we know where he ended up going. And for the assist trophies whose position gets moved to the center or wherever automatically, like Pong here, of course nothing interesting happens. So that's fun. Next, the Daybreak. It'll work at first, but then you'll get KO'd and the attack will stop. The visual effects won't go away instantly, but the damage will. So that's all kind of mundane, but that Daybreak one reminds me of one last thing to test. Final Smashes. What happens if you activate one once you step into the KO timer zone? And for Samus, here it's very similar to Daybreak. It'll work, and then she'll get KO'd and it'll stop. Plain and simple. There are a lot of things to test for this section, so let me just clarify something before we get into it. A lot of Final Smashes move the user very slightly, to where if you activate them right next to the Blastzone, they could get pushed in and it'll get cancelled that way. So this isn't necessarily something exclusive to this wall clip. But the timing kind of is, since normally when you cancel a Final Smash with the Blastzone, that ends up cancelling it somewhere near the very beginning of the move. But with the KO timer, that gives us quite a few more seconds to see the Final Smash play out before it gets forcefully cancelled, which could lead to some uniquely weird things. That was my mindset going into this. As always, I didn't test every single character, but I tested a good variety of Final Smash types just to see what happened. Oh, and I suppose I should finally say this here, but yeah, the glitch works on the whole roster, I imagine. For the larger ones like DK, it'll require a different setup, but as long as Villager or Isabelle are close enough to and facing the wall, it'll work for anyone. For Peach's Final Smash, when she gets KO'd, the music will still play no matter what, but whether or not the Peaches spawn or the characters fall asleep depends on the timing of when Peach gets KO'd, and otherwise it's normal. For cutscene Final Smashes, the results were very dull. For the ones that take you to a movie, it just activates, plays out, and that's it. The user will get KO'd immediately after, and the victim will get launched. Now for the ones that keep you on stage, one of two things happens. Either the user gets KO'd in the middle of it, and the victim pops out perfectly fine, or, like for Kirby's, the user just won't get KO'd during it. It's weird that there's a distinction, but that's about it. It's possible that there's a specific cutscene Final Smash with a uniquely weird result, but the word unique is technically an antonym for cutscene Final Smashes, and these were the results I got for the ones I tested, so there you go. And for the Ica likes, since you get taken out of the outside area, obviously it's perfectly normal. A similar thing happens with Bowser Jr.'s. For Mewtwo, with the perfect timing, if he gets KO'd after using Psystrike, the projectile will still move and work as normal even with Mewtwo dead, which could actually set up for a pretty interesting combo. Oh, and for Pokemon Trainer, the attack will just keep working. You won't get KO'd in the middle of it, only after it's done. So again, there's a distinction, but nothing really broken. Okay, now I'm just realizing this while editing the video and watching the footage again, but Charizard's Fire Blast just isn't showing up, is it? Like, I'm pretty sure its distance is normally infinite or something like that, so the fact that we don't see any Fire Blasts in the Final Smash is actually pretty interesting. But yeah, I just felt like I'd add that in there. But curiously for Ganondorf, you can kind of tell that the animation of him turning into Ganon just doesn't happen. I guess regardless of dying or not, this transformation animation just won't occur outside the walls, and thus the Final Smash just won't work, which is finally something unique and cool. Now, Luigi was the most interesting one out of the bunch I tested. Normally, the Final Smash will suck up anyone really close by almost instantly after it activates. Yet if the character is on a different side of the wall, the Final Smash just won't reach them. Now, if they're both past the wall, and the Final Smash gets used, when Luigi gets KO'd from the timer-based system, it'll actually automatically KO anyone caught in the Final Smash too. See, before it started, Isabel was right on the wall, where the timer doesn't get triggered. So Isabel shouldn't be getting KO'd by said timer until way after she actually does. So I definitely think when the final smash gets forcefully cancelled like this, Luigi sorta takes the opponent with him instead of just releasing them, which is actually pretty hardcore. And that was about it from what I tested. I'm sure there's plenty of obvious ideas I could have touched up on, but the video's getting long enough as is and has to release at some point. As always, if you have any other ideas on other potentially interesting things to test, leave them down in the comments, but for now I think I'll leave that there. I really do love this silly technique. It kinda reminds me of the barrier skip from the Wind Waker, except you know it's just way easier and a bit less important, but still about as interesting, right? It's not super common when a fact involves so much testing that I feel the need to make it the only main topic of the video, but it just kinda turned out that way. It was unfortunate that a lot of my ideas didn't really result in anything too interesting, but I guess that's just sorta how it goes. It's good to know those types of things either way, since I know people would ask the question. Even though I tried being more thorough this time around, there's probably a few things that slipped my mind, so it's possible I'll return to this topic in a future video anyways. But for now, this is all you get. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to tell your friends and family and bosses about this amazing new tech, and have fun no clipping into KO land. And while you're doing that, let me thank my gorgeous patrons Rain, Scully, Sylvan700, Burbo, Sick in the Dank, and everyone else for their support. Stay casual, and I'll see y'all later.